So welcome everybody. We're formally starting, and good afternoon from Texas. We are going to spend the day talking about reincarnation. And when we deal with reincarnation, the star of the show is actually not you or I or us who are reincarnating. The star of the show is the soul. So we need to start with a little bit of information on the soul and some reminders to make absolutely sure that we all have a firm foundation on exactly how the soul operates and what it does for us in the reincarnation process. So a reincarnation is a whole and complete process originating from one soul. And this means that a soul incarnation is not made from fractals of various other souls related to you. The only reason I mention this is that I have been in countless discussions or exposed to countless presentations where it is presumed that when a reincarnation takes place, you or your soul is sort of assembled as a puzzle by multiple pieces of multiple other souls, okay, that are not related to you. That is simply not the case. The soul is a whole and complete process or entity, if you will, that is indivisible, and as such is the one that is being reincarnated. So this is very important. Now, that does, when the issue of fractals comes in, it's obviously so that there will be pieces of your previous incarnations in your existing incarnation now, and that in that process, fractals play a picture, but they do not play a picture when it comes to information or pieces from other souls. The second thing is that the soul cannot be destroyed, it cannot be killed, it cannot be crushed or otherwise manipulated. I hear people say, for example, he crushed my soul, or my soul feels crushed. Well, your soul can't be crushed. I feel that my soul was destroyed. Your soul is not going to be destroyed. You know the expression "save our souls," SOS. Your soul doesn't need to be saved. It is going absolutely nowhere. It is eternal, and it is perfect, and it is whole. What needs to be saved is your physical flesh. That's a different story. But your soul is never going to have an issue with that. Also, keeping in mind that the soul was created perfect by the light from the very beginning. It is not an entity that evolves or grows or develops, or that you are going to change or alter or anything like that. The soul is its perfect entity. It will not improve. It is not in an embryonic state at this point, whereby when we reach a certain density down the road, it is fully developed. The soul remains the soul, and that's it. Now, will it migrate? Yes, that it will. It will go from physical body to physical body. And the first person in the global civilization, in the Western civilization, who introduced that to the Western civilization was Pythagoras, some 600 plus years before the Common Era. And he was absolutely a maniac about making people understand that the soul was migrating from person to person. So he was a very connected individual. Also, keeping in mind that the soul serves as a collective device. That is its main purpose. It's a library of everything we do. It keeps a library of everything we do, and it includes hearing, seeing, sense, smell, and it's on auto record 24/7. You don't have to turn it off, turn it on. You are on constant surveillance by your own soul, day in and day out, 365 days of the year. So keep that in mind, because when the light wants to go back and check something or see how you did on certain things, they go into your soul library and they check that out. And your soul library is, of course, in your higher self, or your higher self and the soul are essentially connected together. And so that's a very important thing to remember. We are being watched on a regular basis. And also, the soul is its own spiritual entity, and it can be accessed individually, or it can be accessed collectively. We'll talk about collective access of the soul a little bit later, hopefully. But there's a microphone that is open somewhere here, if we can close it.
It's not.
Compton, can we please mute it? Maybe not. All right, we will continue. So the next one that relates to reincarnation
It's not letting me speak.
And how religions influence their own views on reincarnation. Yeshua has told me directly that religion is a disease. So those words come from him, not just from me. And some religions are embracing reincarnation more than others, as you shall see, because we'll walk through them here in a second. And it depends on how closely they are attached to the offspring from the Garden of Eden experiment. So I shall repeat that, and that is that some religions are directly driven or derived from the Garden of Eden experiment, Adam and Eve and everything that came after that, the Abrahamic race or culture, if you will. They are more likely not to believe in reincarnation. And the reason for that is that the cloning of the human ego manipulated DNA that was used in the Adam-Eve process was negatively reinforced at the process of Adam and Eve. We talked about the ego last time and how negatively oriented beings in our space came in to influence us. They were very active during the Adam and Eve process, and the grip of the negatively polarized ETs at that point was strengthened enormously. And that has given fruition to the Jewish faith, among others. And after that, what we call today the Judeo-Christian faith, with everything that that encompasses. Negatively polarized individuals, fourth density and fifth density, they do not promote a soul system that ultimately lands them in a solely positively polarized density. They want to stay negative. And the fully polarized, positively polarized density is the sixth one. And that's the one that they are worried about, because at that point, there's no going back into negative polarization after the sixth density, or after the fifth, actually. So, and if they did promote the soul system where you could choose between positive and negative polarization, they would actually be promoting self-destruction. So that is not likely to happen with the negatively polarized forces out there. So let's take a look at the religions out there and let's see how they are faring. And then when we're done with that, we'll talk about the exact process of reincarnation and how the steps on that wheel are actually working and how they impact us. So let's talk first about Hinduism, which is probably, or actually not probably, it is the largest religion on the planet that fully embraces reincarnation, and they represent 15% of the world's total population. They don't represent 15% of the people with belief. They present 15% of all people with and without belief. Their faith are or is built on the concept of reincarnation. That is the basis of it. All living things, according to them, have an Atman, which means a piece of Brahman in them, or a spirit or soul. They have that life breath in them that they define as soul. Other religions from the Indian continent, like Jainism and Sikhism, strongly believe in reincarnation as well. So you have a whole subcontinent there with billion-plus people that are fully in bed with reincarnation and truly endorse it. Then we have Islam, which is one of the fastest growing religions on the planet today. They represent 23% of the world's total population, and this is the exemplified religion that came after the Garden of Eden event, because the root of it stems from the split of Abraham's son, and who went on and became the seed to Islam. And that process itself was driven by negatively polarized individuals, because it goes against unity. The Quran squarely rejects the concept of reincarnation altogether. There is no mention of it anywhere in the Quran, though it preaches the existence of soul. So they do believe that human beings have a soul, but they don't believe in reincarnation. And it claims that there's only one birth on this earth. And when that birth is over and that process is done, doomsday comes after death. And at that point, the faithful will be judged as to whether you are up for hell or whether you are up for unification with God. So according to Islam, you have one shot at it, and that's right now. Okay. So it's time, if you are hooking on to Islam, it's time to make the right decision, because if not, you'll have some issues. All right. You won't be able to come back. Now, the next one is Buddhism. They represent about 7.1% of the world's total population. Here's the religion that is very removed, really, from the Adam and Eve scene. We know that when Adam and Eve were born, there were a lot of people living in other places around the Garden of Eden. There were people, that's why Adam was very concerned when he was thrown out of the Garden of Eden, because he knew he had the mark of sin on him, and so did his brothers. They were thrown out of there, and he said, "Where am I going? Because people are going to know what I did here." And when he said people are going to know what I did here, he meant people outside the Garden of Eden. So there were a lot of other people, including all the people in the East, in the Far East. There were tons of people there. Well, Buddhism is one of those that is not related to that Garden of Eden experiment. And some Buddhists believe that enlightened individuals can choose to be reborn in order to help others become enlightened. So there is an important, very important element here of sharing, which Buddhists believe in, which is tremendously positive and which makes absolutely total sense. Others in the Buddhist faith, depending on which branch you are adhering to, when nirvana is achieved, the cycle of samsara, which is the beginningless cycle of repeated births, if you will, reincarnation, ends all suffering and further existence for that individual, and that further existence itself ends. So the all suffering ends at that point, and that's the purpose of reincarnation for what they believe in. That's Buddhism. And now in Judaism, we have 0.2% of the world's total population. Now you might think that's not a heck of a lot, but if you look at their microscopic percentage representation compared to other faiths, relative to the enormous influence that some members of that faith have, it is truly remarkable. I'm talking about people in science, I'm talking about people in the arts, I'm talking about people in philosophy. They are very, very prominent and far outscore the low 0.2% of the world's total population. In Judaism, reincarnation is an esoteric belief within many streams of modern Judaism, including Kabbalah, which is strongly pointing towards reincarnation, but it is not part of the official tenet of Judaism because it is not mentioned in traditional classical sources, such as the Hebrew Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the classic rabbinic works, Mishnah and the Talmud. They are commentaries, if you will, rabbinic commentaries that have been written over the centuries by highly enlightened rabbis, by the way, and also in Maimonides, in his 13 Principles of Faith. He was a prominent Jewish philosopher. They are not mentioned anywhere. So Judaism, just like Islam, they are the first two prominent religions coming out of the Garden of Eden branch. They do not believe in reincarnation. Finally, we have Christianism, which is the largest religion of all of them, with a 31% representation of the world's population. So a third of the planet is Christian. Of that, or in that, you have 17% Catholics, and the Protestant churches all officially reject reincarnation. That's a fact. And so, however, there is fissure in the ranks. Surprisingly, according to a Pew survey, and Pew is, by the way, a very conservatively and careful polling organization that has a lot of clout and a lot of respect behind it. It says that 29% of Christians in the United States hold the belief of reincarnation, namely the belief that, and they define it as when one body dies, one soul lives on in a new and different body unrelated to the first. So despite the fact that the official tenets of the official church, both on the Protestant and Catholic side, squarely denounce reincarnation, people are not buying it. And I find that absolutely phenomenal. So with that in mind, I want to address that issue because it's an important one, especially in our part of the world, where Christianism has quite a strong hold. And, you know, Pramal and I, we often have discussions as well. Why do we talk about Christianism or Yeshua so much? Well, in this global civilization, a lot of things in the Western world since the birth of Christ has happened in the Western civilization. Before that, it happened in the Chinese civilization. And before that, or in between, it happened in the South American civilizations or in the Mesoamerican civilizations. So Christianism, I will tell you, is a faith of reincarnation, but it is misunderstood not to be. And I'll give you three examples now of why that is. But first of all, I want you to know that this statement here that you see on the screen comes directly from Yeshua. It does not come from Mark. So this slide was made from commentaries that were directly channeled from the other side. And I will start by giving you the Nicene Creed, which is at the source of the Roman Mass, and it deals with the coming of Christ. And this is an excerpt from it. It's from the Credo of the Roman Mass. it says, and it's my translation there, so you may or may not agree with the translation, but it says, who, because of men and for our salvation, came down. They talk about Yeshua, Jesus, who came down from heaven and incarnated by the Holy Spirit, or was incarnated by the Holy Spirit, and was made man. In the natural Latin text on the left, they use the word est, which means is. It doesn't mean was, because in Latin philosophy, there's nothing that is. Once you say a thing, it is immediately part of the past. So when you translate est in these texts, you have to go to a was form, and he was man. In Latin, it says et homo factus est. He is created man, but it is translated as he was created man for the reason I just explained to you. So when what the church is saying is that when Yeshua came down, when Jesus came down, he was incarnated. There's no doubt about that. He was incarnated into flesh through the union of Joseph and Maria. Physical union, classic intercourse, classic birth, no funny things. Now, the Christian text also says that Christ shall come again. You're all familiar with that. It's in Revelations, it's in various books of the Bible, that Yeshua will come again. And he claimed it himself. He also said, I'm coming back. Okay. Now, his apparition on the Mount of Olives after he was crucified and reappeared to his apostles, to the disciples, that is not a reincarnation. A reincarnation, like I said, requires the physical union of a man and a woman and a physical birth. That is required for the reincarnation of the soul. What he did was a fourth density reappearance act that was quite unique, but it does not qualify as a reincarnation. But he says, I'm coming back. So if the church says that he was incarnated when he came as Jesus, what do we call it when he comes back? When he comes back again? Well, we call it a reincarnation. The second coming is the reincarnation. The first one is incarnation. And by the way, when Yeshua was born, that was not his first incarnation. Maybe one day we'll have a fireside chat and I will talk to you about the reincarnations of Christ prior to his famous tour back around the year zero. He had multiple incarnations, and I guarantee you it is salivating hearing. Okay, it's really juicy. Anyways, so that's one point. The second point is the argument or the comment that's often given by Christians about being born again. I've often wondered about that because when I came to Dallas from outside Dallas, when I came from Europe, when I came to Dallas, I was baffled by what a large percentage of the population was driven by faith. I mean, I was getting questions all the time. Mark, are you a believer? Mark, do you believe in this? Mark, do you believe in Jesus? Mark, do you go to church? Mark, are you baptized? Mark, are you this? Mark, are you that? But I mean, it was all the time, 24/7. I mean, at work and outside work. And people were telling me, Mark, you need to be born again. And I was puzzled about it. And to the Christian faith today, being born again means essentially being enlightened by the knowledge or the teachings of Jesus as they're expressed in the Bible. That is what born again means. If the light bulb comes on and one day you understand something and you realize I need to go on a more spiritual path, you're being called born again. Well, in the text, Jesus answered to his disciple. He says, I tell you the truth. No one can enter the kingdom of God. Now, if you remember, the kingdom of God is not the Mount of Olives or the gardens of Dallas or your homestead. The kingdom of God is the spiritual kingdom on the other side, the non-physical spiritual kingdom, unless he is born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to spirit. You should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again. So I went ahead in one of our live streamings and I asked Yeshua directly, because he's the one who usually comes in first to us. We have sort of a mentorship situation, and you should have the same, by the way, with him. It's not exclusive to us. And I asked him directly, there's this passage about being born again in the Bible. What does that refer to reincarnation? Or does that refer to getting a refreshed opinion about spiritual values while we're here on earth? He said, no, it only refers to you being born again physically. You die and you're born again. That's when you have an option to change it. So that's a very important factor for reincarnation. Then we, of course, have the very famous issue with John the Baptist, where Jesus would, John the Baptist had an enormous following of disciples prior to his cousin coming on the scene as Yeshua. And he was a tremendous teacher. He was a tremendous speaker, and he was very influential when he was speaking about the Spirit. And he had developed quite a large crowd. In fact, he was super popular. And when his disciples met with, and Yeshua was there in the garden, and they said, is he the Messiah? They thought that John the Baptist, because of his strength, he was the Messiah. And Jesus said, no. John the Baptist, he is Elijah who is to come. In other words, the Hebrew text says that at the coming of the Messiah, prior to that, a path will be opened in the desert, and it will be the reappearance of Elijah. He is John the Baptist, and Yeshua said it directly to everybody. John the Baptist is the reincarnation of Elijah, the prophet Elijah, who lived 900 before Christ, roughly 800 something, in far northern Israel, near Mount Carmel and in that area. So there is Jesus saying directly, Elijah, the soul of Elijah, has reappeared, as the text says it would, by the way, in a variety of texts, as Isaiah and Micah and several others. So there is a proof of that. So there are a few points to remember, just so we can move along here, and which is very important, and that is that reincarnation is the prime engine behind the ascension process. You remember we talked about ascension. Well, you can't have ascension without having incarnation, and it's a critical issue. Procreation is a requirement to soul migration. So those of you, or those of us who have decided not to have families, for whatever reason, maybe we're not capable of having families for a physical reason or for any other reason, you will not help the light in the soul migration of whatever soul is waiting, because you have decided not to procreate. So it's important to pass on what you were given. You were given birth, pass it on. The light wants that. I will go back to, let me just go back to that very early on, when I looked at the human body and the human experience that we have. I always questioned myself, if I were God, why would I create a human being that has such an enormously strong sexual energy? Because in some of us, it's a totally dominating energy. And the answer that I have come up with is that it's such an important engine behind the soul migration. The light didn't want us to think that that was just a passing thing. That is a major reason for being. Okay, and every reincarnation cycle intends to test our ability to find the connection with source. When we are born, we have one task first, and that is the only task we have, and that is to reconnect our GPS to the satellite system up there, to reconnect our spirit, our soul with the light. A conscious connection. That is our life purpose. So if you haven't established your connection, I would recommend you get on the track. Whatever your past incarnation is, by the way, and looking at incarnations very often happens to be an ego process, like a medal you put on your chest. Oh, I was this or I was that. That is an ego process, but you are not that past incarnation. If you were King David, you are not King David today. You are John Smith, and King David was one of your past incarnations. Your past incarnation will not be on your business card, so you don't have to worry about that. So I just say that because some people think, oh yes, I was Mary Magdalene. I've heard that about 1,000 times. I was Mary Magdalene, and they're not. When we talk about the reincarnation process, karma comes to mind, and karma is not, and it's often misunderstood, it is not an insidious dark energy revisiting you from the previous life. And when you lie back in bed at night, you shouldn't be saying to yourself, well, all the people that you pissed off during the day, they had it coming because they had a bad karma. No, that's not what it is all about. It is a concentration, karma is, of the given life lessons that we are working on, but we didn't work completely through in previous incarnations. We did some of the work maybe, and some of it was passed on to be processed at a future time. In other words, there are leftovers and they will be served until we eat them, all right? A given life lesson will be therefore given indefinitely until we graduate from that task lesson. And it is processed and it is given in a very positive way. Yes, the vegetables are reheated. You won't recognize that they're leftovers when you get them. You'll think, oh, this is a brand new problem, thanks to the creativity of the light and the love from the light in a way they have chosen to teach us. Karma can also be eliminated. It is not something that is irrevocable. It'll be eliminated in this lifetime through complete forgiveness of self. So when you have complete forgiveness of self, you don't have to worry about karma because you are united with the light, and that is not insignificant. We shall talk more about that in our next Saturday, Spiritual Saturday, which will be in a month from now. So I want to talk to you now about the 7 interlaced stages of reincarnation as they happen. The very first thing that happens is that along with the light, we create a soul contract. And that soul contract is between our teachers and ourselves. The teachers are soul entities, angel, archangels, ascended masters, and that soul contract is extremely complete, and it's probably the most important step on this wheel that you're looking at today. Because in that soul contract, you're being made aware of the veil of forgetfulness, meaning the contract that you made up on the other side, you are not going to remember very easily on this side. Actually, you're going to forget it. You're not going to see it. So they want to see, therefore, and this is why it's so important that you reconnect your GPS with the light, simply because you can get access to that soul contract, and it's very important that you do. That veil of forgetfulness can be very thick, but it can also be very thin. There are young people who are born who remember very well what happened before they came, and there are others who don't, depending on how strong that veil is. You will also follow counsel from your teachers on a variety of issues. You will decide together who your biological parents will be. You know, like coaches on a soccer team, the light rotates the positions. For example, Pramala and I, we are married today, but in one incarnation, she was my mother. In another reincarnation, a couple of 100 years ago, I was a husband. In another incarnation, I was a cousin. In another one, I was a son, and so on and so forth. And so they will rotate the positions, and that will be decided in the soul contract. You choose your biological parents. You will also agree on choosing a spouse if it's applicable, or it will be agreed that you will not have a spouse if that's what the teachers and you agree on, because there will be a declaration of special offsprings. This is very important in the soul contract. That was part of the soul contract, for example, of Mary, the mother of Jesus. An angel came and told her, look, you're going to give birth to a son who is going to be very unique and very special. That was declared to her. That was also declared to Elizabeth, who gave birth to John the Baptist. An angel came and told them that. So that was all part of their contract that they were made privy to. But you may not be made privy to that, and you may give birth to a very special child. So your line of work will be determined. Special work tasks will be given if necessary. It will be decided at that point whether you're coming down as a light worker or not. So there are two sort of categories in the soul contract. One of them is if you're coming down as a light worker, devoting your life, or at one point in life, hooking up to becoming a dedicated helper to the light as we're transitioning into the fourth density, then that is a specific track that you will follow. If you don't have an assignment as a light worker, then you follow another more secular path, always working for improving your actions, your thoughts, and your thinking. You may have special tasks that will be assigned in the soul contract. For example, you may have been short on being kind in a previous incarnation. You may be urged to be less violent this time, or to be a better provider for your family, or to focus more on it, or to take better care of your body, take better care of your family, be less materialistic, for example, or learn to love yourself a little bit more, or learn to share more. There are multiple issues that will be dealt with in the soul contract, but everything is decided, absolutely everything. Nothing is added afterwards. That is the contract, and that is what's going to happen. The next thing that happens, and this is a process that that you are not involved with, but that the light deals with, and the agents of the light, and that is fetus coding. They take the soul contract information and then program program the fertilization, if you will, pre-embryonic. You know, the embryonic stage is typically from the second week to the 8th week, and prior to that we have the pre-embryonic stage. But the pre-embryonic stage from fertilization happens, and at that point, that is where the ensoulment happens, because that is part of the fetus coding. And it's a process that the light completes. They locate the parents physically. They prepare also the exact time, minute, and the exact location by exact longitude and latitude where you will be born, so that it matches the astrological chart that they want you to have, or the archetypes that they want you to have at the time of birth. We have asked the other side about this, and they have said, look, there are often times where we delay birth because the alignment of the planets are not right, or we preempt birth because we need to go a little earlier. Things happen that made so that we could actually adjust the physical birth process to what we need to have happen or happening on the astrological side. So that's it. That's that. So the physical programming of the fertilized nucleus happens at that point, and the embryonic stage moves into the fetus stage, of course, where there is constant rapport with the light. Remember that inside a woman's womb, the baby lies essentially in a bath of water. That water is very important because water is a conductive element for the spirit. Don't forget the baptism of Christ. Water was not used because Yeshua needed a refreshment on the bank. It was used because it was the element that was preferred by the light to convey spiritual coding. And it's not unimportant that the baby lies in water. It's very, very important. And it's another reason why it's so important that we have clean oceans, because dirty water means a rusted wire, essentially, in transmission. They can't use it very well, or as effectively. Then after birth, we have childhood. And by the way, prior to birth, if there is if the light figures out that, you know, there is no love, this baby is not going to go into environment of love, etc., they may choose to abort, or to have a miscarriage, or to whatever can happen, and so that the child can be redirected, or that DNA for that soul can be redirected to another parent or another situation. That happens quite often. The birth and childhood is important because at that point there is a constant interaction with through the soul to the other side. The soul is not fully linked up to consciousness at this point. That happens much later in life. That is why it is completely, pardon my language, but it is idiotic to baptize a 2-month-old or a 4-month-old or a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. They have no cognitive knowledge of the soul and receiving the Holy Spirit. When you are born, you have received the Holy Spirit. And when you are fertilized, when the egg is fertilized, at that moment, the ego is already in your body. And for the same reason, confirmation process through the church at the age of either bar mitzvah or confirmation at the age of 8 or 10 or 12 is ridiculous, because you're reconfirming that you were baptized, your faith. Well, at the age of 12, you're not ready. Christ was ready, and he was an exceptional human being. He was ready at the age of 30 or thereabouts. So the full cognitive knowledge of the spirit is not happening in childhood, but there's a constant work, there's a constant process going on, back and forth communication, downloading, uploading, downloading, uploading. Then we come to the life triggers. The life triggers are important because through the veil of forgetfulness, there's still things that are coming through. When your soul contract is made, the light uses previous reincarnation that you had to influence you in your current life, because it's an experience that you have. And soul experience, or the experience that you have in your soul, is very important. Imagine the soul, for example, as a large, what can I say, a large loaf of bread. And imagine that you take that loaf of bread like Mrs. Baird's bread, and you slice it up, and you have multiple slices. Each slice of that Mrs. Baird's bread is a lifetime, in my example. And you have multiple of those lifetimes. You don't have 20 or 30 or 40 like you have in Baird's bread. You have hundreds or maybe thousands. So they build on that experience to move you forward. For example, I'll give you the example of that Pramala had. She has always had an inclination towards becoming a medical doctor. And she actually qualified fully to be accepted into medical school. It didn't happen because of practical concerns and practical issues. Later on in life, she went back and asked the light, you know, by the way, I always wanted to become a doctor. Why did that not happen, since I was so qualified for it and still am? They answered, you have already been a doctor and you know which one it was, so you didn't need to be it. And she had been a doctor, a very prominent one, actually, 220, 230 years ago. And so there was no need for her to repeat that experience. So they will give you a new experience, and you will get life triggers to remind you of those experiences. I can tell you in my life, I'm involved in, I love many things. I have interests in many fields. And every morning I wake up and I ask myself, should I make that my primary field in life? And the light reminds me, no, you've already done that. Okay, you don't need to do it again. So those are the life triggers out there. And you have, of course, I'm sure many of you have heard about déjà vu, which means already seen in French. Déjà vu, when you walk into a scenario and say, oh my gosh, I know this place. Oh, I know, I feel totally at ease with this person. I know this person. I feel like I know them really, like in the core of my heart. Or you go to a place and you say, I've been here before. That happens more than often. Then after a lifetime of trial and error or trial and success, it's time to do the crossing over and go back home. That process, the preparation for that process can take some time. It can take a year, it can take 6 months, it can take 2 weeks, it can take quite some time. For example, we just went through the passing of the Queen of England, and the staff close to her said, and I followed carefully how they described it, and they said she was ready for this for a long time. After she passed the Jubilee, she was essentially satisfied with everything that had happened and was ready and finished the business that she had to do to prepare herself for that process. Some people are not as conscious about it as she was, but it's something that happens, and the returning home happens and is completed when the soul leaves the body. The soul will not leave the body when the soul is not ready to leave the body. The soul knows exactly when to leave the body, okay? It is not something that happens by accident. When a miscarriage happens, for example, that is carefully pre-planned in the soul contract. If a baby is born and dies after 2 months, that is carefully prepared in the soul contract. Well, you would say, well, why? Well, do you remember what we talked about last time? Of what are the requirements to get into fourth density for our generation? We have to go through the death process and we have to be reborn. So maybe sometimes somebody is ready, but they just have to go out and be reborn to do a last gasp of air and then go out and be reincarnated into the fourth density. The reasons and the mechanics of the soul migration are quite complicated sometimes. And they're out of our reach, by the way. Then as we get to the other side and the soul is purely in its spirit state, we are subject to the review. Now, the review is not hell and it's not judgment day. It is a review where you will have access immediately to the whole video feed and smell feed and hearing feed of everything that happened to you in your life. And there will be somebody with you with a loving attitude and a compassionate attitude and a helping attitude to walk you through it. And basically the way it happens is that it is you reviewing yourself because you're being shown where you went wrong. Somebody pulls out a chart for you and shows, well, when you dealt with this individual, look how you did. And you say, oh yeah, my gosh, did I do that? I can't believe I did that. That was really stupid. Why did I do that? Remember, you're on the other side in a totally embalmed in love and surrounded by love everywhere. There's not a bad bone in your body. There's not a bad thought in your body on the other side. You're 100% enlightened by love. So when you review your life process and you see some of the mistakes you made, or for example, your teacher says, well, look what you did to your mother there. You helped her when she was sick. That was absolutely outstanding. You missed that one in the previous reincarnation. So we're going to take that off the menu of things you need to do in your next soul contract. You did great there, John. You really solved that situation. We don't have to worry about that anymore. That's what happens in the review. There is no condemnation. There is no punishment of any kind, anywhere, anytime. there is simply one thing, and it is a four-letter word, and it is love. Okay, with the anticipation of improvement, of sharing, and of making things easier for you the next time you come down. Let's go up here. Then you come to the life between lives. So part of the review will be where, well, John, you came up short on this issue, that issue, and that issue that we had talked about you doing in the soul contract, but you really didn't come through on those issues completely. So what we want you to do, if you're okay with it, is for you to go and study that. Would you be okay with studying it so that we can take care of the problem? And obviously you're filled with love. You only want to spread love to everybody. So the answer is automatically yes. I will go and study that. And then it is decided where you go and study that. And that will be another planetary system. And you must not be limited in your thinking here to our galactic system, the Milky Way. There are hundreds of billions of other galaxies out there that they will send you to that have options for you. And you will go there to study. And it will be agreed also in the review that once you've done the studying you need, then you will have time off. You can hang out, go and explore other planetary systems, other universes, other creative systems at your level, and go and find out what's going on. Enjoy time off, go on vacation if you want. You might say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go right back to work. I got to go back and finish this thing. And then you go into the process to create and to start the next soul contract, because you'll come back after your studies, after you've been hanging out, after you've had time off. You go back and you say, all right, let's go back and do it. I'm ready. And your teachers say, yep, you have certainly done the right studying. You hooked up with the right entities, and we can get you going. And then you start a new soul contract, a new incarnation is ready to go. And that is the wheel, or the cycle, if you will, the never-ending cycle, the samsara of life, which is reincarnation. And it is that which has brought us all here today. And you have a unique experience today that is uniquely different from any life you have had before. You have never lived with the parameters and within the parameters that you're living with today. It is totally different, and it is unique for this lifetime, and you will never revisit this type of life ever again. It'll be different next time. The light is a master at moving you on positions. You may be a goalkeeper one day, you'll be a forward on the next incarnation, and you'll be a defending back on the next one after that, and you'll be a manager of the soccer team on the incarnation after that. So it's an ever changing dynamic wheel that is controlled by a supreme intelligence. All right, now that we have completed that, I want to finish up by how to approach knowing your past incarnations. This is a little bit important because there are two approaches. One of them is that you view your incarnation as a curiosity, or like, I want to know who I was. Well, you weren't any other than who you are now, but your soul visited a body that may be that was different from the one you are now. So you're approaching this from a curiosity point of view, and you simply want to know who, when and where. And you want to, after that, once you find out who you were, or you were a farmer in Poland in 1600, you just continue living your life as if nothing has happened, because you are simply interested in the flesh and bone and blood issue of that incarnation, which is the least important one. The most important one is, how was your soul process in that incarnation? And that brings us to the second view, and that is that your incarnation is a possible tool to look at how the incarnations may have impacted, for example, family relations, how they may have impacted partner relations, professional choices in your current life. and what it is that you need to correct from past incarnations relative to how you're living your life right now. I recommend, obviously, that you don't take the circus approach of the first, where you just look at it from a merely knowledge of past incarnation, because that is a very trivial and mechanical outlook on it, and it is really of passing interest. Once you know that you've been Cleopatra, and by the way, you have no idea how many women I've met who said they were Cleopatra, but once you know your past incarnations, if you just look at it from a trivial point of view, it is of no interest. What is of interest is the fact that the real lifeline, literally speaking, and no pun intended here, that lifeline is offered to you when in trance you allow the light, or it can be out of trance too, but especially in trance, you allow the light to filter through the millions of actions that you have had through all your lives. Millions of them, through hundreds of lives. Just like a supercomputer, it pulls out the top 2 or 3 issues that need to be addressed in this lifetime. And then showing you, just like in a video in your head, how you lived that out in those lives in the physical terrain, and where those issues occurred, and how you need to address those issues in this lifetime. That is the phantom way of using the experience and the knowledge of past incarnations. That is how the light wants us to use that information. That is not just a passing thing. And by the way, as I mentioned parenthetically here on this slide, light streaming that we work with here was designed with the light. We did it together to facilitate exactly this.